questions for oral answer. Would some honourable member care to move that the House take note of miscellaneous business? The Honourable Judith Collins.
I'd like to begin by acknowledging the tragedy in Japan in the last week. The fact that we have an earthquake, a tsunami and a nuclear threat to our friends in Japan is one of those tragedies that I think many of us were not even thinking was an option when we had our own tragedy on the 22nd of February this year. Despite this terrible time, we know that the people of New Zealand and the people of the world's thoughts are with Japan as they go through this terrible situation where it was bad enough having the earthquake and then the tsunami, and we saw it on the various news reports as these houses and people were swept away, everything just swept away in its path, and then to have this nuclear threat. When we had our own tragedy on the 22nd of February, Japan was one of the first countries to offer us assistance. And I can remember on the 24th of February, on the Thursday after the earthquake, seeing at the CTV building the Japanese Urban Search and Rescue Team, or USAR team, coming down to the CTV building to help go through the rubble to see if they could find anybody alive. And I spoke with one of the doctors with the USAR team from Japan. They're extraordinarily professional people who came with that USAR team. They worked really hard and they have now had to go back to start work in their own tragedy. Mr. Speaker, the earthquake or the aftershock on the 22nd of February did actually bring out the very best in our people, and I think that's something that we can be very proud of. It's also brought out the very best in our Christchurch-based members of Parliament across the House, who I note in the press today are still holding clinics, are still trying to do the best that they can to help their constituents. And I'd like to, on a non-partisan basis, congratulate them for keeping on doing the job that they are paid to do and that we expect them to do. I'd also like to say about the comment about the fundraising in New Zealand. Never has an Aucklander seen so many pro-Canterbury people and really dyed-in-the-wool Cantabrians as we have over this matter. We have had fundraising from one end of the country to the other. We've had fundraising all over the world for people sending us help. And I think when I look at some of the very best of our people, I think back to the 24th of February when I met a young constable, 6 months in the New Zealand Police, whose job it was to take me around some of the places where people were dead, where they were being, all sorts of work was going on. He had 6 months experience. His own home, when I asked him how was it, he said, well, it's destroyed. The swamp had gone back to the swamp, where the swamp had been drained, and his house was now covered in liquefaction and debris. He had a wife and young baby, and he said, oh, but we're all right. So why are you all right, says I. And he said, well, my wife's made good friends at Plunket and one of them took us in. And so rather than being home or rather than going and looking after his own property or his own family, he was at work, as we would expect him to be, because he's a professional and he's one of our finest. And as we went around Christchurch, around the central area, we were stopped by various people. We were in a marked police car, and they came to ask him for help. We had some people who came to ask him for water. So he popped the boot of the car and out came the water bottles for the people. We were asked for petrol, and he let them know where he thought the next petrol station was open that they could go to. And when we were at the chambers in Christchurch where all the people around the civil defence were working, we were approached, or he was approached, I should say, by a young girl who wanted to get an asthma inhaler. Her asthma inhaler was on the 5th floor of an apartment building down the road, and it was far too unsafe for her to go in there. And he went off to have a look, and then he went and let her know where to find the asthma inhaler, or an asthma inhaler. And I looked at that young man, and you know how it is as you get a bit older, all policemen look so young. I looked at him and I thought about how very, very few people Nobody went to ask the people in suits, they all went to ask the police officers. And I would like to congratulate them for the most excellent work that they have done through this terrible time. And can I thank all of our emergency services, our USAR people and everybody else, done a marvellous job.
The question is that the